Call this meeting of the Lakota Board of Education to order. Jenny, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Casper?
Here.
Mr. Lovell?
Here.
Mrs. O'Connor?
Here.
Mr. Parnell?
Here.
Mrs. Schaefer?
Here. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Oh. Second.
Jenny, will you please call the roll?
Sorry. Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mr. Parnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mrs. Schaefer?
Yes. All right, Jenny, we'll turn it over to you for our financial discussion.
Okay, so you have in front of you a packet of information. The first thing in the packet is the five-year forecast. And this includes the assumptions as well as all of the numbers, and we know there are a lot of numbers. On May 7th, at the regular board meeting, you received a draft five-year forecast. The only change between the draft and what you're seeing in front of you now is we now have a House version of the state budget. And so the House version is in the forecast, which accounts for an additional $138,986 more dollars in 2021 and beyond in state aid. That is the only change in the forecast since the draft. You will also see behind the forecast 2 pages, which includes 3 different slides. Todd will be happy to know that I did not prepare a PowerPoint for the five-year forecast. But what I did prepare are slides that you are used to seeing, which relate to the revenues from 2014 through 2023. You'll see the total dollar amount as well as the percentage increase estimated throughout the forecast. On the back of that page, you will see the same type of information for total annual expenditures for history, as well as the projections through 2023. And then the last chart is a combination, the revenues, expenditures, and the cash balance, all on one chart. This is traditionally what we look at prior to adopting the five-year forecast, so I've put those together for your information and consideration as well. The highlights of the forecast since October, and I mentioned this at when we looked at the draft, our revenue is up since October when we discussed this by a little over $1 million. Expenditures are right on target. So there's no material change since October. The assumptions, there's been no changes to any of the assumptions, but like I mentioned, the state budget, that change is in there. The spending deficit in 2023 still exists, but it has reduced, as well as our fund balance, because we're estimating an additional $1 million this year. That does have a cumulative effect. So in 2023, we are estimating a larger cash balance than we estimated in October. So I know that's, it's over $3 million more in 2023 now, total cash.
Now versus back
Now
in the fall.
versus
The
back
draft.
in October.
Okay, that's great.
That is good.
So do you
Still a
have?
deficit in that year though, right?
We
In the
still
fifth
have a
year.
spending deficit in the 5th year. Yes, we do.
But less than it was
It is,
October.
yes. But I do want, while we're on the topic of the state budget, this is a 5-year forecast. We are in the middle of a biennium budget discussion right now, which will cover 20 and 21 and then we'll have another biennium budget for 2022 and 2023. So to try to predict where that's going to be is really difficult. So what we've predicted is the House version in 20 and 21, and then keeping it flat for the remainder of the forecast. So, and you will see difference, when I say it's flat, and you're gonna look at those numbers and say, well, that doesn't look flat to me. Well, the reason why it doesn't look flat is because the casino money is in there as well.
Oh, okay.
And we are predicting some additional dollars with the casino money, but not much, you will see.
So if we want more, we should go to the casino and gamble.
There you go.
All right.
It helps with the revenue for the district.
I'm doing it for the schools.
Are there any specific questions about the forecast, any of the predictions?
Do you have any knowledge of the sports gambling bill that's in the House right now? Is there money, is part of that for schools or not?
I don't think they're that far ahead that I've heard, but I heard they're talking about.
That's all I've heard is preliminary discussions, but I have not seen any type of estimates on what type of revenue that would generate.
I wouldn't bet on it.
You wouldn't bet on it?
Oh, isn't he clever?
And then I also just heard about another bill that was for wraparound support services, like with different programs to kind of help steer families to support services. And there was going to be additional funding for that. Is that already in that House version that's in there, or?
So that could be the piece of, because the additional dollars that are included in the governor's proposal as well as the House version are for student wellness, and it is for those wraparound services.
Okay.
And it is very specific in nature. It's restricted dollars. We can only spend it on that type of, those type of
Whatever
services
it
for our
says,
students.
Yeah, I
It was
think,
not it was not a significant amount per
It's not a
student,
lot.
as I recall.
No. No, it amounted to over 600,000 in 2021 or in 2020, and in 2021, it goes up to over 900,000 total. But the part about that which is misleading is the amount that we receive in foundation dollars from the state currently for FY19 will be frozen. So if we receive additional students, we don't get any additional dollars for that. It's frozen. The only additional monies that we will receive are for those student wellness dollars that are very specific in nature and have to be spent on those specified items. The things that are not frozen are any deductions that would be taken out of our foundation dollars. The deductions can increase, but the revenue will not. So.
On the permanent improvement thing? Is that part of the 5-year forecast?
So we can move it into that.
I mean, when we approve a 5-year forecast, is this
No.
included?
No, it's
Okay.
No.
Right. Question.
So the 5-year forecast only includes the general fund and any debt service funds that are related to general fund debt, and that's it. The permanent improvement fund is separate and alone and is not part of the 5-year forecast.
Because I see a lot of red and a lot of parentheses.
So that is getting into the next part of the conversations. So last time we talked about the forecast, one of the things that we talked about was putting more structure to how we plan and how we prioritize our dollars. And part of that work has been the 3 policies that you all took a look at the last board meeting, which one was on setting up a rainy day fund, setting up a 90-day cash balance reserve, which means, we're going to make sure we have no less than 90 days. But that policy also set something in place that said when it reaches 150 days, then the superintendent can bring a plan forward to the Board of Education to say, I would like to spend a portion of the monies above the 150 days, but it has to be aligned to the strategic plan. Then the third policy is a structurally balanced budget policy. So those are the three policies that we have worked on since October, and you've had a first read on those. One of the documents that I put together for discussion purposes only looks like this, and it's that snapshot that we usually look at, which is total revenues, total expenditures, your cash balance, whether we've got a spending reserve or deficit. Then you're going to see that encumbrances and reserves. What I did is I said, let's make the assumption that the rainy day fund policy is approved, as well as the 90-day with the 150-day threshold is approved. What would those different buckets of cash look like for availability on different things? So what I tried to do in the green area, well, above that, the reserves, you're going to see the $4.2 million in 2020. If you decided to set up a rainy day fund in July, we can have it on the board agenda to move monies into a rainy day fund and establish that reserve fund. I'm estimating that that amount would be, it would be 4.2 minus the 500,000, because that also includes encumbrances. But it would set up that fund, and what it is you take the total amount, your cash balance the prior year, and if your cash balance increased, you take half of the increase, and then you can move it into the set aside for rainy day. That's a lot of math. Did you follow me on that?
Only because I had a finance committee meeting to
Yes.
follow that.
So basically, if you do not have a spending deficit, if your revenues exceed your expenditures and your cash balance grows from one year to the next, you can take that increase for the growth of the cash balance, half of that, and move it into a rainy day fund. So in July, we can have that conversation, and that's the maximum annually that you can move into there. So that's setting that up. Then the 90-day reserve for us in 2020, 90 days would look like $44 million. We're estimating that our unreserved fund balance before the rainy day fund is over 114 million. So you'd put money into the rainy day, then you'd say, okay, we have to reserve 90 days, which is another 44 million, which then gets you to 65.7 million as an unreserved cash balance. Then if you're looking at that 150-day threshold, how much would that be? 73.7 million. Well, we've got well over that. So then that would put dollars available for Mr. Miller to say if there is something strategic for the district that he would like to bring forward to the Board of Education for your consideration, then those would be the dollars that you would look at.
That would be the 36.
Yes. So it kind of puts some structure in place, because right now, cash is cash. There are no,
Right.
it's just all one big pot of money. So I think the work that we've been doing in trying to develop some sort of structure is a good thing, and it's a very good start. So I just put that together just so you could kind of see the policy
Thank you.
work and how that would actually look with the dollars. attached.
And because I asked this question in the Finance Committee meeting, to get that money out of the rainy day fund is just a vote by the board.
Correct.
There's no, you know,
But Mr. Miller, the superintendent or the treasurer could not just say, we're moving that over
Right.
there and we're going to spend that money.
Right.
We would have to bring it to the board and you would have to vote. It
Right.
would have to be
Majority.
at least three majority to put that money back into the general fund to spend it. So we can't just use it once it's over there.
Okay, so now the budget you have here with additional staff and transportation.
Okay, that is the very last piece where remember when I asked for if there were any scenarios that you all wanted to look at? Julie was the only one who sent me anything, so if anybody else sent me anything, I missed it. And that scenario is including transportation, freshman transportation, which we're estimating at $2.2 million. And I'll just go over what Julie sent. So freshman busing, $2.2 million, beginning in 2020, is included in there.
where's that sheet, Jenny? Is that?
It's
this
the
one?
last one. It has
Very
the
last
red
one,
with
it's got the
additional
red
stuff.
at the top.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep going. Right there.
Keeping class sizes at 23 in our early childhoods, 25 in our elementaries, and 27 in high school, never to exceed going 3 students over, and having 16 long-term subs on staff. And I'm assuming that's like rotating subs. So, what we came up with,
Was that your suggestion?
These were just thoughts,
Okay.
yes.
Right,
It
and
just came from me, so.
Yep.
and 2 extra guidance counselors in the high school buildings. So, that's why it says additional staff. So, the 2 guidance counselors are 2 FTE, but then based on last year's enrollment figures, if we would move to 23 pupil-teacher ratios in our early childhoods, that would be 13 more full-time equivalencies, 13 more staff members. This is our estimates based on, what we saw last year. For 3 to 6, it would be an additional 12 staff members. So between those 2, that's 27. And at the high school, 7 to 12. 10 additional staff.
So 37 total additional staff.
37 with the guidance counselors.
There would be space issues too that we'd have to work through.
Correct.
Right.
Especially with the early childhoods.
Right.
And
Because
it-
that's what we say we're doing now, right? Isn't that what we say our targets are? 23, 25, and 27?
24.
Hearing a voice in the back. 24. And when you say 3 over, do you mean 3 over per teacher?
Right.
Yeah, I don't think we hit that unless there's some combined classes or a high-end class.
So this forecasted number where it shows red in 21 now is a result of all of that things we've added, correct?
Correct.
We haven't added them.
Right.
Well,
If,
Just
right,
in-
if we,
In
yeah.
theory.
I know that.
correct. Yeah,
I got it.
It's a supposal.
right.
Yes,
Yes,
I knew
a
that.
scenario. This is a scenario. If we would add those additional staff members and add in freshman busing, then what would our financial forecast, our 5-year forecast look like? So that's what this scenario is.
What, Jenny, how many, do we know how many extra buses, like, for us versus private schools? If we do that, Chris?
Chris has it.
We estimated for Lakota, partnership, it would be 27 buses, and for non-Minnesota schools, it would be 21 buses.
How many?
21.
Just because you have to go around and pick up the kids.
Right.
and do a shuttle to take them all to.
Right.
Now, in the budget bill, there was conversation around changing how private school busing looked. I know in the House version that was dropped, right? That's not a consideration, but there was also conversation about a separate bill. Was that?
Yes.
It's a separate
We are still working on a standalone bill.
Okay.
And the transportation recommendations do include working on syncing up those calendars better than what they are now. The way it works now, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but calendars don't matter. If someone is in session when we're not in session, we have to transport the students.
That's why I understand it.
And timing doesn't matter.
You know, we've had 24 days this year where we transported those students.
So part of what I've been working on with the budget proposal is trying to sync those up and saying, we would not be required to transport students if we are not in session, unless they want to
Yeah.
fund us for those additional 20-some days.
21 buses, 24
But it's
days.
costly.
So what was the cost of those 24 days, Chris, when we transported, when we were out?
I don't have that on me right now, I can get it, because we bill it separately, and invoice with Peter Bender called basic days. So
Mhm.
it depends how many schools are in session that day, that we're all, so we have one school, we have 5 schools that day.
Mm-hmm.
I get that total for the year.
Thank you.
How do we combat the hypothetical that we're going to do this? How do we combat the private school busing, freshman busing? Law says we only have to bus their freshmen, and because we're only busing our freshmen. But as we know, the private schools are 9 to 12, and Susie is a freshman and Molly is a sophomore. Are we telling the parents that Molly can't get on the bus?
If we're only transporting freshmen, we're only transporting freshmen.
Yeah, that's my concern, okay. Because we can't let Molly on the bus because we're not transporting our sophomores, and our sophomore parents would be not happy.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I think that I haven't been shy about saying that I think that we need to look to a solution for ninth grade busing. I think it is a huge barrier for our families, especially when you're looking at kids in multiple grades. We have grade band schools now, which creates even more of a concern for some of the parents trying to shuttle kids, and they're a separate building. They're not part of the 10-12, and I know it's expensive, but I think that we're doing a disservice to our community by not offering it.
As long as we have to be prepared to know that offering that puts us at a deficit earlier, which isn't a bad thing because we've already,
I mean, our cash balance also grows by 10 million over the course of the
Right.
5 years. So, I mean, I think there's conversations around that as well. And there are other places that we could have conversation around where do we need to trim in order to make that happen. I mean, nobody likes to have those conversations, but I think that
Well, everything's a trade-off.
it is, yeah.
well, and this doesn't include any, and I know that the facilities comes out of PI, but we also know that that is running in the negative.
So we can move into the PI discussion if you would like, because for me, the part where there is some urgencies is our facilities and our PI fund.
Right.
We will come back around to this, Jenny.
Pardon?
We'll come back around to this.
Mhm.
Okay.
Sure. The PI fund was part of the it was set up during our 2013 levy, which set up 2 mills that are directed into a PI fund for our use annually. And we started deficit spending in our permanent improvement fund last year. And you can see that projecting out forward based on where we believe our technology, because the thing about technology is, once you purchase it, you have to keep that up. So, working with Todd Wesley, we've tried to predict where those years are going to be where we need to, refurbish our technology for our students and staff, as well as the security systems that we've all talked about we need to upgrade. That's in there as well. The planned projects that you see is for all of our facilities, which we have 23 facilities. That's not including our central office. And when you look at $3 million annually, that doesn't go very far. And Chris and his team have a priority list that we look at annually to see, to talk about, what are the high need priorities, what are the medium and the low. And then he takes that $3 million and plans accordingly based on priority. There's always going to be some things that come up that were not on the list, that we take care of with contingencies, but this is where, especially if we're talking about a facilities master plan and the needs of our facilities moving into the long-term and future, this is the area where I think that we need to spend some time and focus and come up with a plan.
Can we get that priority list?
With Chris? Absolutely. Yeah.
Did you say it was going to be 2 to 3
2 to
months?
3 months before he
No,
could.
are you talking about the annual plan?
No, you said that they have priorities, high, low,
Annually.
and I'd just like to see the list of what those priorities are.
Yeah.
So
Which
for the
is
3,
separate
for the
than
3 million,
facilities.
not the facilities tour that we did. Is that what you're talking
I
about?
I want both, yeah.
Okay. I was more.
Wouldn't you want both?
I would definitely want to know the 2 to 3 month list you were talking about when we talked about facilities, that long-range plan. I mean, it would be interesting to see what a yearly kind of list of improvements are across the district, but,
Like a maintenance.
We have a 5-year forecast of the facilities. And like, the 5-year forecast is real detailed this year, then we
Yeah.
go up in the next couple of years. Then we just have buckets of things like
Sure.
HVAC, roofs, parking lots, big buckets that we don't have to spend money in based on age of equipment.
yeah, I mean, I think that'd be interesting
We
to
have that.
see. Yeah,
That would be useful information, Chris.
yeah, I agree. So help me understand, I personally appreciated the tour. Well, I don't even remember when that was, last week.
Monday, yeah.
At some point, just being able to go into our facilities and to really walk with your team. So Chris, thank you for having your team there. They were all-stars. Being able to walk through and just being able to see how enrollment trends impact the buildings, but also some of our aging facilities. You had stated in 2 to 3 months, we would have kind of a list of suggestions. Is that how here would be option A, option B, option C. Once we have those, how does that all work? Maybe that's more of a board question than a Jenny question, but, what kind of discussions do we need to have about how to make those things a reality if we're going to be approving the 5-year forecast tonight, or it'll be up for a vote tonight?
Well, and to go back to Todd's question, the PI fund is separate
Right.
from the 5-year forecast.
Because that's where the money for the
But-
facilities comes.
We will need to have a master plan for our facilities for the district, so.
But could be funded outside of the PI.
Yeah, we're gonna need
Yes.
to know what the list is,
Right,
how much it's gonna cost.
correct.
And how we intend to pay for it.
Right,
That's the discussion.
and it's separate from this. from the
But is
separate
it
from the
coming out of the
5-year
general
forecast.
fund
Well, that's why I
as a
say
transfer, because then it is relevant to this?
I-
That's kind of
But
where
we
I'm
don't
at,
have
Linda.
I
It-
think,
It's one conversation.
I think it's one conversation. It is that big picture, which is
It's
the.
refunding the PI levy.
Master plan. What is that master plan? What's that cost? Timing?
And where's
How
the
are-
money
how
coming
are
out
you
of the
gonna
general
pay
fund,
for
a
it?
PI levy? What do we, right?
And all the options available to you, which the other piece to all of this too is that state partnership that is being offered up, and to evaluate that as well and to see if that works within the plan. So, yeah, there's a lot
And if we
pieces to
begin
pull together.
accepting those funds, we have to do renovations to bring everything up to those standards, right?
You have to follow the state's rules, but they are a lot more flexible than what they were back when we built our buildings 20 years ago.
But we're not grandfathered in. If we make renovations, we have to bring everything up to those standards. Is that correct?
So there's a program called the ELP program, which is an expedited local partnership program where you could adopt a resolution saying you plan to participate with the state. Once you adopt that resolution, let's say we have a major HVAC project that we have to do. That would go towards, and we would get credit for that from the state after you pass that partnership ELP resolution with them. Without that, it's way more
Sticky.
difficult.
What does that commit us to?
We can forward you the resolution, but it doesn't commit you to, I mean, you can pass the resolution saying that you intend to have a master plan with the state and to move forward with them. But that's all dependent upon getting all the pieces together and honestly having the money to do it. So
You're seeing more upside than downside in passing the resolution.
I do.
Yeah, I think if you pass a resolution, at least you're on the radar, you're gonna get credit for any work that we do. If we decide we never wanna participate, then we never participate, but if we decide we do wanna participate, at least we'll get those credits for work we've already completed. So, and to go back to your question, Linda, once you complete the master plan, you can implement portions of that master plan, you don't have to do the entire piece of it. So you
And
can
it's based on their recommendations?
based on recommendations, so if you just want to do one portion of one building, you can do that, but you got master plan implications and you got local building code implications. So you got to balance those out. So you may want to do this work in this building, but if you do this work, that means you got to update everything else in that building as far as.
That's my question, is the amount of dollars that go into bringing everything up. It's not just that one project.
Potentially could expand on being a bigger project from a building code perspective. Does that make sense?
Which means additional expense that has to be considered. Thank you.
Any other questions about the PI fund? I think that, this is just me talking, but in a couple months, when we get the finalized version back from Chris, that we definitely need to have another work session to sit
Yes.
down and.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we don't have all the
View it
pieces of
all.
the puzzle right now.
Well, I think we could probably all somewhat agree too that after touring some of those buildings, there's definitely decisions that are going to need to be made.
Yeah.
Especially in regards to West Freshman. And so we're going to have to hash through that at some point.
Right.
And to your point, Todd, I mean, this doesn't look too pretty, this PI sheet, so. Yeah,
Because, yeah, there's a lot.
Let's get all the
Out there.
information, and we'll take it from there.
yep.
Yep.
I
Right,
agree.
we don't have all the pieces.
There are also a couple of pieces of resource information for you in your packet. There's a very large piece of paper that's staffing information. Linda had requested information on our staffing numbers going back to, I believe, 2012,
Last levy.
2013. So when Rob Kramer put that together, it's shared with all of you. And also, she had requested some things that are found on the CUP report. So that CUP report is also there for you as well. And I just included a few of our districts that we usually compare ourselves to on that report as well.
There were a few pieces that stand out as concerns to me, especially as we look at the possibility of Julie's suggestion of additional staff and transportation. I know that freshman busing continues to be an issue for our families. I completely understand that. I'd like to see us look at some other options possibly. I appreciate that Chris got us this information. I know Butler Tech is using a program they're kind of calling an education Uber program, that they're doing much smaller vehicles, and they're doing it very specific toward individual students, depending on internships and other student-specific pieces. And there may be some potential there, and I would appreciate understanding what those costs might look like before we go further with the 2.2 million. Did you have a question?
Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Not really, but I can get you more information
Okay.
if you'd like it. But again, they don't have busing at all, so they've chosen this as the piece that they would use because their associate home districts provide that. So they're able to provide some transportation, and this seemed to be, it's a pilot program this year. And I don't have any cost yet on what it's going to prove out to be at the end of the year, again, because it's student-specific, so.
Got
But
it.
I'd like to see us looking at some other options.
And I think that's part of the conversation too, when we're looking at what does high school experience look like, and we've started to go down that path this year in earnest with the curriculum department and Lakota Next, so there's other opportunities other than, you know.
So that was a
Busing freshmen.
second point that I think has to play into our conversation as we talk about this. We're still in the middle of the high school redesign piece.
Right.
That could potentially eliminate the freshman building completely, which would take us to a whole different place.
Correct.
So I think it's
Which would
a little
be-
premature to have this conversation.
Which would be included in one of the
Correct.
options that Chris would be giving us in 2 to 3 months, correct?
Yeah, and I
Eliminating the
think what we're
freshman
talking
building?
about tonight is there are just a lot of different options and opportunities. I don't think, and I
It's a
don't want to put words in
facilities.
your mouth, but you didn't bring it up because you think that's what we should do. You just want to know how
Right.
much would it cost if we
Right.
did that.
Right, and
So-
what the implications would be.
Right.
I mean, I also think we're looking at other different partners, and I know one of the solutions that was, one of our local partners at the Edge Teen Center is looking to expand their footprint over to the West Freshman Building, which I think will help our families too for a lot of the, I mean, that certainly doesn't alleviate the need, but I think that will help our families at West Freshman next year significantly as well.
And I think we all know we have issues and things that we need to work on. I think just bringing it up and talking about it's good. It's getting that conversation going, other than saying, no, we don't do that or whatever.
I mean, how many years have we been talking about freshman busing?
Well, it was eliminated, what, 8 years
Since we
ago?
eliminated it,
And how long has that been?
we started making cuts back in,
So we've been talking about ninth grade busing since January 2011. We saved, how much money did we save in the last Peterman contract?
$2 million.
$2 million? All right. We can keep having conversations. I'm all about getting creative, but I
Right.
also just want to make a statement that no matter who I talk to in the community, ninth grade busing comes up. It's just it's a hot topic. And one of our core responsibilities as a district is to provide transportation so students can make it to school and learn. That's all I'll say. I'm done.
I understand the burden it places on family. I would not say that it's our core responsibility.
One of them, providing transportation to get kids to school.
Well, and I also think we have to be
When they-
careful not to, let's pretend we bring it back and in 3 years, we have no money and now we're cutting it again.
Todd?
I was just gonna say, I used to walk 6 miles to school.
Uphill both
Uphill.
ways.
Well, in the
Yeah,
snow with
absolutely.
no boots.
Barefoot.
That's right,
Yeah.
exactly.
With no boots
You know, we
in
have
the
a lot
snow.
of families
No, I will
with
s- I will- I will
two-parent
say
working
that
families,
Number one thing
and
I hear from the community is freshman busing.
Right.
Whether they have freshmen or not. Either
Right.
they did, or they're going to, or whatever.
Or they have to deal with the traffic of it.
we don't live in Madeira. We don't live in Wyoming. We live in a large district. We have a lot of families with two parents that work. We have grade level span buildings that provide different start times. We have a lot of complexities that we've created in the district that are great. However, I do believe it's a core responsibility of us to make sure that we've given opportunities to get kids to school if we can, within the law, I mean. But again, I
a
understand that others might not
cost-effective
agree
way.
with me, but I hear it all the time, all the time.
So other concerns that I had, and I think that's a continuing conversation on transportation, I also agree with Kelly's point about long-term sustainability of doing that. So when I looked at some of the numbers on our staffing issues, I have some concerns around that. We've added several additional positions since our last levy, and we did make some significant cuts at that point, but to the LEA, we've added 84.65 FTEs. To our support staff, LSSA 19.436. Administratively, we've added 15.6 FTEs for a total of approximately 120. Our enrollment has not increased like that. Our enrollment from 2013-14 to 18-19 has increased by 1.4%. If I look at those numbers from 13-14, just taking teachers and administrators, that's a 9.3% increase. And our costs have increased 19.1%. And those numbers concern me. That does not seem like a sustainable path.
But we can also celebrate some of those numbers as well because we brought the arts back, which was critically important. We know that. We made that decision, and I believe that if we talk about educating the whole child, and we hear that all the time, what opportunities are we giving our kids? We took a step forward, and we said that we wanted to invest in that. So those numbers are part of what you just read as well. So I think that's important to consider.
Maintaining gifted levels of staff.
That was a priority as well.
There may be
priority.
good reasons for that, but what I hear are not necessarily conversations about reallocation. What I hear are new staff, and if I look at what Julia's suggested we consider as well, that's new staff. And in terms of the arts,
You suggested
I'm supportive of that as well, Brad. But I also see an increase of 44 staff in that year. And in my mind, what was supposed to happen, what I recall from those conversations, was it would be cost neutral. And it did not turn out to be cost neutral if we've added 44 new staff. So I agree with you that there have been some great things done. There's great work going on. This is not a question about the work. But it is a question about our decision-making process, and are we reallocating, or are we adding more layers on? And I think
would
that
answer
should be
that
part of our
by saying that we're
conversations.
serving kids, and that does not come on the cheap always. Is there a specific area or subject or school that you have a concern with?
Can I jump in really quick? When we approved the 5-year forecast, not this past November, but before that, we knew that that was going to be higher allocations of staff we invested in for the high school redesign as well, which was also a conversation during negotiations. So we as a board knew that was going to be an increase in staffing. And we moved forward with that because we knew that we wanted to do that high school redesign, and we wanted to bring back specialist teachers.
44 new staff in 1 year.
Right, and we did not talk about reallocation of resources at that point. You were part of that conversation.
I believe I did talk about our decision-making process and reallocation, and I continue to believe that that's the route we need to have. There may be good reasons to add additional staff.
The other
But I
thing would
think
be
we
the
should have those
social,
very-
sure, but the social emotional
I was just going
component
to
too
say,
that
we
we've been
talked
dealing
about
with.
that. We talked about more
Yeah.
for that.
What if, I know that Rob Kramer has put a list together which details all of those needs, those reasons for the 44. And I believe that 5-year, this is, to Linda's point, it is more than what that 5-year forecast did
Sure.
include.
Right.
There were additional staff members that were included in that forecast, but then when it all came down to it, it is more. So I know that Rob Kramer has put
Right.
something together.
The other big piece was all-day kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
That was an up too.
That was a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, my long-term focus is towards sustainability.
Understood.
And I would also just like to say, for the alternatives, we were asked to bring forth different things we would like to see the pricing of, and I just wanted to see what the cost would be for these different alternatives. That was not saying, these are things I want to necessarily move forward with. These are things I wanted to see the pricing with, so I would like to clarify how that was just stated, that these are things that I believe that we have said that these were some of our targets for class sizes and how far off we were from those of what we're actually doing in the classroom, I felt would be interesting to see what it would actually cost, so it would tell me what we're actually doing versus what I think we're saying we're doing in
Right.
class sizes. And if we have to add 35 staff, I think we're quite different than what we're saying we're doing in our average sizes, so that tells me that we're,
Do we have the information of what our class sizes are looking like across the district? Did you ask for that?
I did not at this point.
Is that possible for us to get that information?
Sure.
But, so I just want to clarify from what you said, that I am not suggesting, given the cost of what that would be and what that does to the forecast, that that is something that we can afford at this time.
Thank you for the clarification.
So pupil-teacher ratios, do you want to see that like for each one of the, like early
I
childhood,
think that
elementaries, all
report
of
that
that?
we get, that we generate.
Yeah.
That's an easy thing.
We can share that with you.
And
They're
you know
high.
what, I do understand your concern about the increase
That
in
they're high.
staff. We are going down next year.
So a clarification of a comment from today's meeting
Yep.
at the district council.
Sixth grade.
He said we were adding 14 new staff next year.
No, that's not what he said, it was replacement staff.
He did use the word new, so thank you for that.
But new to Lakota, new to the district. But
It's re-
retirements and other people leaving.
It's not additional FTEs then?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Jenny, one of the things that I'd asked for as well was some of our numbers compared to similar districts in terms of administrator to student ratio and some of those pieces.
So that's included
on
in
this sheet.
the CUP report. It's included there
Mhm.
as one of those line items.
So when I looked at that, what I was seeing was 85% more than a Mason or Mason and Warren County. You know, it's a comparable district to us, certainly I think in terms of achievement. Can you help me understand why?
I would have to dive into those numbers. I will say this as well. It depends on how the staff members are classified. For example, there can be employees who are that serving administrative functions but not classified as administrators, just to be honest. And I believe we're pretty honest in trying to make sure that we're classifying all the staff as appropriately as we can. But every district has a different way that they look at that. But we can dive into that because that number usually looks really good for us. So,
Because they have different titles and.
You're saying it could be teachers providing administrative services but not direct service to students? And that would change that
Some cases.
comparison.
some cases, but again, people code things differently. But that number has changed for us, so it is one of those numbers that I think we need to dig into and say, what has changed?
I
Well,
would-
are
I
you
would-
what's
talking about?
considered-
I would
hold on.
appreciate
Are
understanding
you talking
it
about the
better.
FTE number of administrators? Is that what you're talking?
Pupil administrator ratio.
Well, I mean,
I mean, don't we have a principal and an assistant principal in
we have
each?
23 buildings, they have 5.
Five, that's what I was
I
going to
mean,
ask.
that's an obvious,
Well, no.
Or-
It's based on a number of administrators per
Per
student.
student.
Or vice versa.
right,
So
they're naturally
total
going to have
enrollment
less.
compared to number of administrators
Enrollment
across the
versus
district.
employment.
Right.
It's not, nothing to do with how many buildings.
So, okay.
They could have higher administrative to pupil ratio just because they're in one location and they can do shared with their guidance, have more guidance counselors. I mean, it could be a makeup of how they handle that. We have to have a principal in all 23 buildings.
And an assistant
And so it naturally. I'm
Yeah,
saying
if
that
you
correctly.
jumps
do-
up your,
No, we discussed this once before.
We embrace neighborhood schools, and with that, there's a cost of doing
Remember
business.
this discussion? We had this discussion a couple years ago. We can go back and dive into it again. That's,
Yeah, it's been a while since we've had this conversation, but I do remember the last time we looked at this, the pupil administrator ratio looked a lot higher for us.
Well, we're still doing better than similar district average, and we're still doing significantly better than the state average. So.
And then I look at a school district like Hilliard, which has 5 more kids than we do.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Are
that's,
they on that
that's apples to apples, they are.
So,
just don't know how we would, in at least the early childhood and the elementary buildings, how you could decrease administrators with everything that kids are dealing with and what we're dealing with now. To have a principal and an assistant principal doesn't seem out of the realm of
I don't think we're even
possibilities.
considering that at this point.
No.
Well, I'm just saying, where do you, if Linda believes that we're high administratively in the buildings, where would
We are
you?
higher in ratio as compared to comparable districts.
Right, but where?
There's a lot of factors that go into that. It could be the way employees are classified.
Right.
Again, we need more information.
Right.
Yeah. We look really good in other areas. I mean, when you look at classroom teachers' average salary, we look really good. Administrators' average salary, we look really good. So I guess there are pieces that you can pick out of here and say, we need to dive into that one more. And then
Right.
there are pieces where you say, wow, we look good on that.
I think it's a process of continuous evaluation. And we have not delved into those details in the same way that we have in the past. I think it's
We haven't.
relevant conversation.
Salaries as a percentage of operating revenues. We look really good on that with salaries and
Right.
benefits too, so. But yeah, this is a lot of good
Right.
data that we just
Exactly.
have not,
Right?
we haven't really discussed in a while.
It's nice to have been able to make some investments in some areas that we've wanted to invest in. Are there any other areas that we need additional information on? Are there any other questions regarding either the permanent improvement levy that we can get right now? We know that we're getting more information in the future from Chris, or any other questions on the 5-year forecast at this point in time? Are we ready to move forward with the 5-year forecast as presented at this time? Any
Sound
further
good.
discussion?
I continue to be concerned with the deficit spending in the 5th year of the forecast, which this is no news to anyone.
Are there any specific suggestions you'd like to make or things you'd like to look at?
No, just I think it's the board needs to have further conversation around what that looks like and changing that trajectory. That's,
What,
I've already talked about some of those things, Julie, but I'm fine with moving forward.
okay. All right. So we'll get to that in the agenda, but we'll move on to the OSBA overview at this point in time.
I requested that one be put onto the agenda. I had nominated Kelly for a leadership, not a leadership role, just nominated her when the nomination form came out for whatever, just to get involved with OSBA. Ron, our regional rep, had emailed back and said, hey, just wanted FYI, let you know that you already have a representative for OSBA in leadership. And so my understanding that's you, Linda, which is great. I have no issue in regards to if you're leadership, if you're not. For me, and maybe it's an understanding, I'm in my 2nd year, just how does that work? Is that once you're on it for the life of your tenure on the board, or is there board discussion that we have periodically each year about who wants to represent at regional, state, and national levels? So one, I guess to simplify my questions, one, is there historical conversation around that? 2, how many years have you served for OSBA in that leadership role? And 3, would you be willing to allow somebody else, whether it's committee or Kelly or somebody else, to be serving in a leadership role?
Can you just, sorry, I'm just.
Oh, sure.
Can you just, for everyone's benefit, just talk a little bit about what you've done, what you're doing, and how long, and then jump into the things, just
Sure.
because I don't know all the ins and outs.
So I was recommended and invited 6 years ago, and then vetted. Jenny was part of the vetting
I got a phone
process.
call.
To be a part of the Southwest Regional Committee. And I have been in that role for the last 6 years. And you will retain that role until you make a decision to step out of it. And it is the Southwest Regional bylaws that make that determination.
Mm-hmm.
It is not individual boards, and every board is not represented on that Southwest committee. So if I were to step off, that doesn't necessarily mean that this district would have a representative on that board.
Are the districts, just because I'm curious, the districts that don't have representatives, they just don't want to, or nobody, or they don't want the person that was,
Again,
they didn't pass the vetting? I don't know.
I can't answer that question.
Okay.
I can just talk about my experience with it.
Just
So
curious.
every board isn't represented.
Every district
I
is
mean,
not
that's what I meant, sorry,
represented.
District, yeah, sorry, that's what I meant. What do you do as that person?
It's kind of whatever is needed. I attend regional meetings, act as using my voice of experience there. I help at regional conferences, I help with the planning process for the region, with the Capitol Conference. It is pretty much doing whatever is needed.
Was there somebody from Lakota on it before you,
There was not.
ever, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, I don't think so.
Just curious.
I'm going to, I have not seen their bylaws, but I would say that their bylaws are probably specific on how many number
Sure.
that they have on the
Right, I
executive
would think.
board and how they choose or whatever, but that's probably why
I-
not every district is.
Oh.
I think
They
they
only have
try
so
to
many numbers.
represent different types of districts, whether it's urban or rural or
Big or small?
suburban, big, small.
Mm-hmm.
There's quite a bit of diversity on the board.
My question was not, and that had nothing to do with your ability to serve or your expertise in that role. I mean, I trust that you're well-equipped for that and you're the best person for the job. It was more of, as a board, those of us that are in leadership roles outside of the core function of the board, like an extension through SBA and some of the organizations we're part of, like, how do we know who's doing what? And how do we raise voice if there's somebody else on the board that would like that opportunity but can't have that opportunity because you're serving in that role, or you're serving in the role, or you're serving the role? So it's more of a question around, how do we know what the heck people are doing? I mean, is that a conversation we have, or do we just kind of continue on just doing what we've done, and as new board members come on, they just never get those opportunities because it's been a tenured thing? So those are,
So I was on the board for 6 years before I was invited to be a part of that. I think it naturally, as I've been on the board, people rotate on and off of things as they leave the board.
Sorry.
okay.
Never mind. Forgot what I was going to say mid-brain.
I mean, that answers my question. I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Are we not discussing?
Do I have a motion to approve the 5-year forecast as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
The one that we're talking about is just this, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the financial things sitting in front of us.
All right, Jenny, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Lovell,
Yes.
Mrs. Casper.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Connor,
No?
Mr. Parnell,
Yes.
Mrs. Schaefer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second?
Jenny, any discussion? Jenny, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Parnell,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Connor.
Yes?
Mrs. Casper.
Yes.
Mr. Lovell.
Yes.
Mrs. Schaefer.
Yes.